very much, Dean. Okay, if my fellow panellists could join me, please. We'll have some introductions. Smashing. As Dean says, we're going to be talking now, really continuing Liz's theme about access to justice and also focusing on actually what changes can be made. I think when we think about the subject of access to justice, we often get downhearted, we think that nothing can change, but actually it can. It doesn't have to be hopeless at all. And the kind of examples we're going to be hearing from the panellists, I think will give lots of insight into how that can work. So some introductions first. Firstly, Dr. Sarah Nason, on my right. Sarah's the senior lecturer at Bangor University, and she's going to be talking initially about some research that was done through the university and no doubt other work that her department does. Then we have Emma Bates, who is the Director of Positive Action on Poverty at the Central England Law Centre. Central England Law Centre is somewhere where the consumer panel have had a lot of interest. We actually went for a visit there about 18 months ago and saw absolutely wonderful work that was being undertaken. So I'm very pleased to have you here. Next we have Dan Hopewell, who is the Director of Knowledge and Innovation at Bromley Bow Health Partnerships. And again, we've already heard a reference from Liz about the kind of work that Dan's involved in. And then last but by no means least, we have Laura Pinkney, who is the head of NLS Legal, which is Nottingham Law School, and that's at Nottingham Trent University. So we're going to have 2 rounds of contributions from the panellists, and then we're going to throw it open to you for a question and answer session. So the first contribution that the panellists are going to be making is around how their organisations are working collaboratively to improve access to justice. And Sarah, you're up first.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to speak based on a research project that was looking at the role of communities and connections in social welfare legal advice. So the organisations are community, voluntary and social enterprise organisations and advice services providers in 4 case study areas. The project involved academic and community partners. It was funded by the Nuffield Foundation and British Academy as part of their collaboration on understanding communities. It examined how access to advice interacts with community connectedness, equality, well-being and access to justice. The case study areas, they were the village of Bangor on Anglesey, North Wales, Deeplish in Rochdale, where we worked primarily with a South Asian community, several areas of Hackney, where we worked mostly with Black and African and Caribbean communities, and Dartmouth in Devon, where there's conspicuous affluence, but there's real hidden poverty. A unique aspect of this project was that we mapped out the social networks of community members in each of these locations, including who do they speak to regularly, who are those people, friends, family, neighbours, colleagues, service providers, and whether the people in the network also know each other, so the size and the composition of the social networks. We then looked at how people used or did not use their social networks when they encountered problems, mostly social welfare legal problems, but other kinds of legal problems affecting them in their community. As far as we're aware, it's the first type of research of this kind. We kind of call it social networks of advice-seeking behaviour. Obviously, there's a long history of research that looks at what people do when they have a problem, but it doesn't show this visually in the way that we have. So we found there's a correlation between the size and the connectedness of people's social networks, their well-being, the occurrence of legal problems, and problem resolution. Generally, those people with larger and more well-connected social networks have higher levels of well-being, less likely to experience legal problems, more likely to be able to resolve them when they do have problems. But another key factor was, especially in accessing advice, was the diversity of people's social networks. So those who had connections to a range of different people rather than just family and friends were more likely to report their problems as being resolved. So we found that the community in which someone lived appeared to have a greater impact on what they did or didn't do when they experienced a legal problem and their likelihood of their receiving help than did, for example, individual characteristics like age, disability, employment, even internet confidence as well. So our report's available online. Probably the Nuffield Foundation website is the best place to find that. But the findings are represented visually. And what you see is the patterns of social network size and connectedness are different across geographical case study communities. In Bangor and on Anglesey, the local community pub, the community hub, big shout out to the Tafarn y Ioreth. It's the place where people go to make their social connections. They talk about their worries, they realise there's support available, and there are really good connections to advice services. Most people are then able to contact those services independently. In contrast, in Deeplish and Rochdale, people's social networks were smaller, less diverse. There is a real need for culturally, linguistically sensitive advice services embedded within the community hubs. Big shout out to Deeplish and Spotland community centres. So we focus on how these organisations make connections with each other and communities. And we also talk about how to support them most effectively. So we found that community and community assets of all kinds are central to well-being, to preventing problems occurring and worsening, and for accessing early help in the right place at the right time.
Thank you very much. Emma, same question to you. How are you working collaboratively to improve access to justice?
So I want to start by saying that those facing the greatest inequalities face the... Do you want me to use it? Sorry, I'm used to having a loud voice, but... Yeah, those facing the greatest inequalities face the greatest gap in accessing justice. And in order to overcome that, you have to collaborate. So at Central England Law Centre, we put collaboration at the centre of our partnerships. We make sure that we're linking with local, national, statutory and voluntary partners. I'm going to talk to you about our partnership with Coventry City Council. So I've always at the Law Centre been at the forefront of our partnerships with the local authority, sometimes a little bit controversial to some of our other staff members who feel frustrated that many times we're actually challenging local authorities. So why are we partnering with them? Why are we investing in that? We're investing in that because local authorities hold a lot of data and insight into what is going wrong in people's lives. And unfortunately, as a law centre, we're not always privileged to see that amount of information. We need to collaborate to find it. But also, we meet people too late. So we meet people when they're already catastrophically affected by a legal problem. And yes, we can put in some justice intervention, but usually they've already experienced mass trauma and some of what's gone on cannot be undone. So we partnered with Coventry City Council and the Research in Practice tool, the Low Income Family Tracker, which uses local intelligence to identify those people who are look like they're at greatest risk of experiencing a problem. So it's a preventative methodology. Full kind of disclosure, I partnered with the local authority on this because I was worried that they might use it for ill. And I wanted a law centre to be there to kind of regulate that and to inspire what could be possible. So to keep telling the story, which is really important to us, that action on rights is action on poverty, access to justice is critical, we can't do it without one another. So we partnered with the local authority and the data dashboard, and they were able to identify people, families that are benefits capped. Now they can identify that because those families are in receipt of what's called a discretionary housing payment. So that is an assistance to fund extra bits of their rent that they can no longer afford because they are restricted about the amount of benefit they can claim because of the number of children they have and the work that they're failing to do. So you're getting a context here. It's kind of a difficult picture. And if a law centre isn't there, my worry is that we can demonise people and we seek a solution, an obsessive policy solution about work. Now, some of the people that are benefits capped can work and could work more hours, and that's part of our solution as a law centre. But what we actually found using the data dashboard was that many of them cannot work, and many of them have failed justice interventions around the DWP that mean they're not claiming or receiving the benefits to which they're entitled. So in order to come off the benefits cap, you either need to work over 16 hours, which is the policy kind of obsession, or you need to claim disability benefits because you are disabled or too unwell to work, or you're looking after someone who's too unwell to work, or you've got a child in your home who needs access to those benefits. So we told that story really strongly to both the data dashboard team and the local authority and said, You ask those people directly for consent to talk to us, and we will talk to them. We will provide an expert triage that looks really in detail at their lives. It looks back a little bit as well, because some people are benefits capped because they didn't have a grace period they should have been exempted for 9 months. So we looked back a little bit and we looked forward a little bit into their story about what's going on in their house. What we found was 70% of the families that were benefits capped in our first initial pilot project in Coventry could have the cap removed. So they were entitled to monies. They maybe had even made applications that had failed, and they needed an advocate and an assistant, and they needed a collaborative partner to tell that story again, to move them forward. So 70% of families could come off the cap. 1 or 2 of them was about working. It was about 0 hours contracts that were fluctuating their income, so it meant they weren't making the amount of money that could remove the cap, so they needed support about that. They didn't understand that, so they needed a justice partner to tell them that story. But we're talking massive amounts of money. So on 20 households, we looked at a benefit uplift of £354,000. That's money that should have been in those families' households. They shouldn't have been needing to receive discretionary housing payments. So for a local authority, it's a big win, because they don't need to spend that money on a discretionary housing payment any longer when they get the right money in payment and the benefits cap is lifted. But the challenge is that justice takes time. So some of these cases took us 13 months. So you have to collaborate, because in that time, lives don't get instantly better. People still need to receive money, food, help inside of that community whilst that justice intervention resolves itself. Thank you.
Very much. I'm told that you don't need to use the microphone because yours should work. It's just Sarah's. Dan, same question to you, please.
Yeah. I just wanted to broaden this conversation out a little bit. We had an interesting discussion in the lift coming down from upstairs about debt advice and housing advice and welfare benefits advice and legal advice. Well, of course, the 3 that I've just mentioned are also legal advice. So we need to remember that, I think. The figure for how much unclaimed benefit in the UK used to be 19 billion a few years ago, now 23 billion pounds a year of unclaimed benefit, and as you've just described, often being denied by the system that should be receipting this money to people. And people have to, the figure of the percentage of claims that are then won at tribunal stage is 85%, so, or 90%. So a lot of people are being unfairly denied, particularly health and disability related benefits. So we wrote a report for the London Health Board in 2023, looking at how to address health inequalities through access to social welfare legal advice. The health inequalities situation is staggering. The life expectancy gap between the poorest and the wealthiest in London doubled between 2003 and 2017. So this is prior to COVID and prior to the cost of living crisis. It went from 9 years to 18 years. The wealthiest in London live 18 years longer than the poorest in London. And access to justice and access to social justice has a big part to play in this. The studies show that 20% of GP time is spent talking to patients about social welfare issues. So there's a big issue there in terms of health demand and also in terms of health time. So our report for the London Health Board was acknowledged and accepted in their meeting in November 2023. And I think quite amazingly, the London Health Board, which is convened by Sadiq Khan, pronounced that each of London's 5 integrated systems of care should ensure that every single Londoner had access to social welfare legal advice. The work we are now doing is about working with London's 5 integrated systems of care to put that report in front of them, carry out stock takes for each of London's 5 ICSs on the situation, and then work with them to improve that situation. And the case we're trying to make here is that if one thinks about these 3 words, integrated, system, and care, we are wanting to redefine social welfare legal advice as a form of care. There is absolutely no point in, for example, North West London ICS spending £6 billion a year on biomedical health delivered at the point of diagnosis, rather than working preventatively around the social determinants of health. And quite frankly, putting social welfare legal advice into a system of integrated care is pennies compared to these astronomical figures that are spent on healthcare. So that's the case that we're trying to make now. Of course, it's working in very, very adverse circumstances. Local authority budgets are completely stretched to the limit. And of course, the NHS also says that its budgets are completely stretched to the limit as well. But we need to move, if we talk about being bold and creative, we need to, and courageous, I think, we need to actually make the case for early intervention and prevention. One of the things we've done, for example, in Tower Hamlets is introduce, so about 20% of our patients have a long-term health condition. These use up well over 50% of resource within general practice, logically. But of course, those long-term health conditions are triggered by their social determinants of health. So we have inserted in each one of these patients, we have 51,000 patients at Bromley by Bow Health in 4 GP practices. 9,000 of them have a long-term health condition. Each one of them has a long-term health condition management plan, which gets reviewed every few months or every year. We've inserted a series of questions about the social determinants of health into that long-term condition plan. So we ask them about housing, we ask them about money, we ask them about food, about heating, all those sorts of things, and social isolation and other things as well, about volunteering, about training, about employability as well. And of course, that triggers a whole lot of people who've got unrecognized problems. They don't know what those problems are. They don't know they've got a legal solution, for example. That leads to referral to our social prescribing link workers, and about 50% of those referrals are then onwardly referred to our social welfare advice team, for example. We've trained one of our social welfare advisors to become a social prescriber, so she carries out both those functions with patients, which is a double win in the sense that she doesn't then have to hand those patients on to somebody else. And of course, the social issues that they face and the social legal issues they face are often very, very interrelated. So they get very, very holistic care. We also need to work, some of this unmet need is actually staggering. The Money and Pensions Service estimate that in London boroughs, between 25% and 33.33% of adults have got unmanageable debt, for example. I mean, there is an absolute well, if not an ocean, of unmet and unrecognised need at the moment. But we also need to work to empower people themselves to understand how to manage these situations more themselves as well. If every one of those people tried to access debt advice, for example, of course, it'd be utterly impossible. So we need to work with communities. We need to empower communities as well themselves. And this is the approach that we're taking across London.
Thank you very much, Dan. And Laura, tell us about your work.
Thank you. Hi everyone. So MS Legal then is it's a university-owned law firm, so owned by Nottingham Trent University. It's fully regulated by the SRA as an ABS. It's the only model of its kind in the UK, so it's fully integrated into our law school, and we've been operating now for it's actually our 10-year anniversary this year. So obviously we're an access to justice organisation. We provide pro bono legal services across a range of service areas. We've got 10 service areas at the moment providing specialist advice. Obviously, as a teaching law firm model, we're providing real-life work experience opportunities to our law students. It's allowing them to develop their practical skills alongside their studies. So those really key skills such as communication, empathy, the confidence and resilience, things such as that. So it's really key that they're learning that whilst they're doing their academic studies. But also, they're getting that experience whilst positively impacting the community, which is also really important. In terms of delivery-wise, last academic year, we dealt with just over 370 cases, and we involved around over 760 students in that activity. So we are talking quite big numbers on what is quite a small team, although we do have, a lot of collaboration and help in the background. But there is, we're a small team of kind of 13 that are kind of core employed solely to work in the law firm. Looking again at the moment for the benefits for our students, one is attainment. So we have data that shows that those students that are gaining that real life work experience do better in their degrees. So around 70% of Nottingham Law School students will achieve a 2-1 or first degree generally, but when we look at those students that are gaining the real life work experience, that goes up anywhere from 85% to over 90%, up to 92%. So it really shows that impact of how bringing the law to life, putting that theoretical knowledge into practice really helps with the legal education and training. Obviously, we're enhancing our students' employability skills, helping them. It's something that they can talk about. It's really great for our students that they can go and talk in an interview about representing somebody at tribunal. The real difference that they have made in someone's life is amazing. And also, what we like to think we're doing is really raising awareness about pro bono and access to justice. Our students are aspiring lawyers, and some of them are going to go and work in huge commercial corporate practices. We want them to take that ethos of access to justice and pro bono with them on that journey. I mentioned it earlier, but building our clients' confidence, gaining that work experience in a really safe, supportive, familiar environment for us is hugely important. And obviously key to the themes of the conference is ethics and compliance. Because we are a regulated law firm, our students are working in that regulated environment. They're understanding and embedding that ethics and compliance from a really early stage. We have a group of students in our risk and compliance team. They review all our files. They have this huge checklist. They go through them, and they sit down with the supervisors. So as law students, they're approaching senior solicitors and saying, "Okay, can you show me where this is on the file? Can you tell me, why that client hasn't been contacted back in the last 2 days?" So, it means it's building, again, they know that they need to raise these issues, and where they might feel nervous about raising that with someone more senior, we're trying to build those skills very early on. In terms of the impact on our clients, so since we launched in 2015, so far we've secured over £7 million in financial awards for our clients, so it's making a massive impact. Obviously, that's financial awards. There's also the other life-changing outcomes that we achieve, preventing homelessness, ensuring that families are achieving those educational provisions for their children with additional needs, saving businesses. So we don't just represent individuals, we do represent businesses and charities and small startups. We see a real theme of small businesses being bullied by the really big corporations. It's a massive issue. And generally, there's no pro bono legal advice. I think we're the only law firm in the country that provides full service pro bono advice in relation to intellectual property, going against the big firms and protecting the underdogs and their small businesses. So very much on key with economic growth as well, the work that we're doing. Diversity, again, another theme for this conference. So Nottingham Trent University is one of the most diverse universities in the country. But one of the main reasons for starting the law firm was so that we could break down those barriers that aspiring lawyers find in trying to find legal work experience. It's so hard for aspiring lawyers to get that. So what we are doing by breaking down those barriers and providing that legal work experience, hopefully there'll be more from underrepresented backgrounds in the profession being able to access the profession as a result of that. And then finally, just to loop it back to collaboration. So obviously the whole model is a collaboration. We have the support from the Nottingham Trent University community, the staff, the clients, the students are all collaborating. The clients love the fact that they're helping to train the lawyers of the future. We work with so many organisations. We have a really good, strong network, referrals, signposting. We don't tread on each other's toes. We have we know that there's some excellent organisations that can provide a certain part of the advice stage, and so for social welfare, they can do, completing the forms, doing the mandatory reconsideration reviews, and then we can step in if it gets to tribunal stage where others won't be able to help with that element, things like that. So we work very much together, ensuring that we're spreading the help and the load. We go out and deliver advice in community centres, so we go to the different areas so that we're there. We're working with, it's termed as the trusted intermediaries. People are going to these charities seeking support, and those charity, the staff there can say, oh, actually come and see our team from Endless Legal who are visiting next Wednesday afternoon and get some free legal advice. So that's really important. We work with Hodge Jones Allen law firm to provide additional services that we can't provide because we don't have specialists in those areas. So again, all about collaboration and really closely with organisations such as Support Through Court as well. So yeah, I think it does show how that collaboration does really help to deliver the access to justice, whilst recognising we're only just kind of dealing with the tip of the iceberg. But yeah, we like to think we're making a difference in our own small way.
Many thanks, Laura. That's fantastic. We're very tight for time, so I'm going to take some questions now. And maybe in answering the questions, you might be able to give reference to the barriers that you've overcome as part of your work. So please, do we have the first question?
Yes, I've got a set of questions actually, so I'll try and keep it thematic given that we're quite tight on time. I'll start off with a bit of an observation here. I think someone's mentioned that spending on more acute issues is easier to justify, such as COVID, but chronic issues don't create the burning sort of platform to do something. So there's an issue there in terms of dealing with chronic issues that a lot of the panellists have discussed today. Generally, there's some themes around community collaboration, where it's happening. There's observations that it's very, very good, but what can be done to make it more of a universal offer instead of a postcode lottery? That's one question. Another is whether there's a case for prioritising how access to justice is prioritised. Could we focus on a few areas and make it a real difference rather than trying to do it everything all at once? And then one more question. If more legal aid isn't the answer, then what measures can be put in place to ensure disadvantaged people could have cost protection to allow them to actually pursue and enforce their legal issues in the courts?
Thank you. Perhaps we can start off with, so one of the themes there is about scaling up some of the things that we've heard. Does anybody on the panel have any thoughts? Go on, Dan.
Well, I'll give the example of what we've done in Tower Hamlets. We have Tower Hamlets Community Advice Network, which has all 23 advice providers, including the Law Centre and one solicitor's firm as a member. We have an online referral platform. 700 professionals in Tower Hamlets are signed onto that referral platform. They are the problem noticers, so that includes social prescribing link workers, social workers and so on. They can all make referrals to any of those 23 advice providers through that one platform. Those referrals are tracked and it allows the advice providers to inter-refer. We provide a whole training program for the intermediaries so that they can understand. As somebody said, a GP does not understand that a debt issue or a housing issue or welfare benefits issue or fuel poverty issue is a legal issue. So we need to train the intermediaries to recognise what those issues are and then know what to do with that. We need to create this ecosystem between generalist advice, specialist advice, and more specialist advice within geographies such as boroughs, for example.
Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in on that point? Laura.
Well, it just occurs to me that I think taking social welfare as something in terms of scaling up, I think we all recognise in the work we do that we know the high percentage of tribunal success, I think, over 90% in, the areas where we're doing that work. So I think there probably needs to be something about us all working together to feed that through to, as I know we all are, many in this room, to change the policy, to see using that evidence and demonstrate and say, these are clear-cut cases. Emma described earlier, you walk into the room and the tribunal panel say, we don't need to hear this case. We've read the papers. Yeah, it's fine. And they grant the entitlement. It's such a waste of time. It's such a huge backlog. And we can use our combined data evidence to really try and address that problem. So that's something where I think we could work together to scale up to really look at where the problem is and address it from much earlier in the system.
Thank you. Would anybody pick up this point about kind of choosing breaking something off and starting with a particular, perhaps, area of social welfare law?
I guess I think that nationally there are initiatives that are attempting to do that. So there are pockets of grant funders that identify issues that they think can be nationally influenced on. So at Central England Law Centre, we're actually partnered with Public Law Project to try and influence around sanctions policy, the policy of sanctioning people, removing their money when they don't do what you ask them to do around job search requirements. And that work we're looking at is around if those that have got the greatest inequalities are more likely to be sanctioned because it's an easier route. You know, you're less likely to hear from them. So I think there are pockets of work that are doing that, but it is very difficult to choose. It's certainly difficult for me as a director at a law centre to choose which areas we should hone in on.
Thank you. Sarah, anything from your research that might help us in terms of scaling up or choosing where to start?
I guess there's a couple of things. I mean, I think the research itself enabled all these different community groups and organisations to share with each other how they connect with communities and what that looks like. I think if there were other platforms, forums where communities could share how they're connecting with local people and how that works in the access to justice field, everyone's very, very enthusiastic to share their good practices and what they were doing. So more forums to enable them to do that. I mean, across the 4 case study areas, the biggest social welfare problem was in relation to benefits. It was things like PIP, and it was the case that when people were getting advice, it was taking a long time to get to resolution, but it was resolved in their favour. So, it's that phrase, failure, demand. Something's going wrong somewhere, and it's costing an awful lot of money to put it right. So it's that.
Absolutely. Dan?
I mean, West Streeting has rebranded the NHS the Neighbourhood Health Service. I mean, the case we're trying to make is that, so this is probably footprinted on primary care networks. We're making the case that there needs to be a lot of social prescribing in each of these neighbourhood health services, or integrated neighbourhoods, as Claire Fuller's called them, but there needs to be social welfare legal advice in every integrated neighbourhood or every neighbourhood health service. We need to create a very, very simple, basic model of health justice partnership here, I think.
Thank you. Tanya, should we take one more question?
Yeah, so there's a question around whether there are any particular organisations that you would welcome to collaborate with you to make access to justice more accessible, essentially. There's a theme, I think, in the questions around that.
Thank you. Anybody like to start us off there?
Well, I fantasised that what would happen today if half of this audience was GPs and nurses working in deprived communities and half of it was yourselves. And then we got you talking to each other. What would the conversation be?
Yeah, I suppose I fantasise about doing a secondment in the DWP for the same reason. For the same reason, though, to experience something from the other side, to connect people to what it fundamentally feels and looks like. I think there is a lot of stuff around the lived experience work as well, which I think is actually a critical component, because I can tell you stories, but I don't think they're as powerful as if people themselves that have experienced these grave injustices tell you them. But doing that work costs quite a lot of money to do it properly, and obviously it can be really stressful for the participants, and we've got to create a safe environment. So I think lived experience partners are critical to doing that well.
Yes. Thank you. Any other contributions on that point? Sarah, go on.
Yeah. That's all right. I think probably anyone who's working in relation to sort of communities, community policies, sort of place building, those kind of strategies. I use the word community, the word neighbourhood is being used. It's really about how much justice is embedded within communities and that kind of policy area.
Smashing. Okay, I am keen to keep to time, and we have come to the end of the session, so I'm going to say my thanks to all the panel members. No doubt there'll be conversations that you'll all be thinking about that you'd like to have during the breaks with all the panel members, and please, I'd encourage you to do that. And otherwise, just hand back to Dean.
Thank you very much to the panel. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, what I will say is that this access to justice as a theme is huge. We could have gone probably all week on this one subject alone. So we've really only touched the tip of the iceberg here. But for me, what I have taken from this is that there are lots of really good local initiatives going on, some really impressive local initiatives going on. There is collaboration locally going on. But the issue is very, very clear from the stories that we've heard, is that this is not rolled out on a national basis. And when we use the word collaboration here, I think we need to see collaboration nationally. I mean, could we see a rollout of what Nottingham Law School is doing, which sounds fantastic to me, in every law school, in every university, which would cover far more areas? Could we see more of the collaboration that's going on with healthcare that Tom has described? Could we see that more elsewhere as well? I mean, it sounds like if you've got a health issue, that's the borough you want to live in. But is it like that elsewhere? I fear not. So I think that the theme that seems to be coming out here is that we need to start joining the dots. So we need to start rolling this out nationally. We need to start learning what works. So from the initiatives we've seen here, they seem to be working. There'll be many others going on as well. What works, then the collaboration is everyone talk together and then see what we roll out from there. That seems to be, for me, what I've taken from the really impressive stories that I've heard from the panel here this morning. And please do, I mean, the idea of this conference, I bring it back again, is not just to talk. We can all talk all day. We can all come up with some ideas. But what we don't want to do is then leave the room today and forget about what we've spoken about, forget about all the ideas, and put nothing into action. So what we need to do is to embrace what we're seeing, embrace what we're hearing, and start putting them into action. So can I encourage you that during the break that we're going to come to shortly, you can go on to Slido, put your thoughts on there. We are going to move away from this subject shortly, but please do carry on putting your thoughts on Slido because they'll all be looked at afterwards. We need to get some action plans. Looking around the room, I know there are enough influential people in this room, and if we come back to that word again, if we collaborate, if all these influential people in this room get together and talk and don't just do things paddling their own canoe, which I think is what happens quite often. Everyone has their own individual great ideas, but if you join the dots, something will happen. And if we do that here, if we join the dots, if we create an action plan, I think something can start to change. On this particular subject, we need a change. We need more access to justice. Part of that is money. Part of that is rolling more money into schemes like we've heard today to give people more pro bono. Part of that is being more accessible. The stories that I told you, it has a place. It's not the be-all and end-all. It's a very small part of it, but it is a part of it. There are many, many different things that we need to look at to try and solve something which we're not going to solve in the short term, but in the long term, we need to try and solve this access to justice issue. As I say, we're going to take a 30-minute break now. During that, please do put any ideas you've got or questions or any thoughts on Slido as well. Also, can I remind